You are not fool's gold, shining only under a particular light. Whoever you become, whatever you make yourself into, that is who you always were. Tara Westover, educated. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski, with Ramya, Amith, and Rems. We're talking memoirs today, which I have mixed feelings about because I find that they tend to be personal propaganda. And even books that we've talked about on this show, like Patriot by Alexei Navalny and Born a Crime by Trevor Noah and the Britney Spears memoir, they don't really share, compromising details or portray themselves in a bad way or anything like that. It seems it's a little self-serving, and I would even go as far as to say self-aggrandizing, if you really want to go that far. Do you agree with me? I feel like you should just take memoirs at surface value as somebody's point of view, but they're not exactly a great portrayal of a person and who they are.
I mean, that's a fair assessment, not to take it as a full picture when someone writes a memoir. But it is, I think, for most people, we have talked, I'm going to caveat this by saying we have talked about memoirs like the Britney Spears one, which I seriously can't think of the name of on top of my head, but I'll check it out for you. Being a little immature, right? We don't think that she was ready to write the memoir, but the angle of that one was she's like, I need to tell you all what's been going on with me, and I need to set the record straight. So there are different angles to memoirs, and I don't think it can be a catch-all kind of sentiment to say memoirs are just not the full picture, because I don't think they're all meant to be.
Okay, that's a good point. Sometimes what they're meant to be is to portray a specific time in their life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be as tight as just a single year of their life or one moment of their life. The thing is, if you're writing a memoir at 35, obviously that's not going to be a portrayal of your whole life, because you're probably expecting to still live till 80, which is why it drives me nuts that Britney Spears released her memoir when she did, because her story is not over. It's so
not
far
over,
from over.
But a catastrophic phase in her life, I think she felt was over. I think she felt she was recovering from something that was just so much deep trauma and that we had not a lot of idea about. And she wanted to put that on the map.
And that memoir, the Britney Spears one, was very much let's set the record straight type of book.
Yep. Then there's just a lot of self-growth. Seriously, I'm Kidding, which is the title of Ellen DeGeneres' memoir, which is funny and short and kind of all over the place, right? It was splattered. She did a great job at just being like, hey guys, this is still me. Just want to put it out there that that's the angle that I took from that memoir, which was, we're all just talking so much smack. She's been under the limelight for all kinds of negative, unreal. Can you believe that this is who Ellen is? And she came out with this memoir just being like, nope, I'm at the core still this person. Sorry that everybody else is losing track of me. I thought that was an impressive idea of a memoir as well.
Sounds like another let me set the record straight type of novel, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think celebrities have a reason for doing that, or influencers.
Our guest today is AMI audio manager, Andy Frank. And Andy, you're a bit of a memoir addict yourself, so I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective on this. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think memoirs serve multiple purposes, and one of them is basically setting the record straight. It's especially for high-profile people like Britney and Ellen and people like that who are subjected to so many different opinions from people they've never met, and people who don't know the full story and don't have the context. And I think that they're kind of trying to iron out their legacy a little bit.
Yeah.
With as Jacob pointed out, a bit of their own spin, perhaps. But nevertheless, I think it's a fair thing for them to attempt to do. But yeah, memoirs can also just be a chapter of one's life, a story they want to share, a story they want to tell, a story that helps to explain perhaps a little bit about why their lives ended up being what they were, or sometimes they're laments. Sometimes they're not really helping one's legacy. They're more tarnishing it than, oh, I wish I never knew that about you, that kind of thing. So it's as individual as the people who write them themselves.
But most of the time, you want to believe in the organic process of why people are coming up with memoirs, right? Like whether or not we enjoy the memoir, agree with the person, or think that they were or weren't ready, from a therapist level. A lot of people come out with memoirs when they do because they feel like it's about time that they tell the story.
Yeah, everybody has their own motivation, and a lot of these are commercial interests. I mean, Britney Spears was on top of the charts for how long?
Oh, she made good money through her drama.
Good money for a lot of people. So the celebrity memoir thing is also, look at Matthew McConaughey with his memoir that sold 6 million copies.
Right.
I was shocked to hear that.
6 million.
Shocked.
I don't really know this guy. I just know he has a funny voice. I guess he is a more interesting guy than just his voice.
But so there's a commercial reason also to take into consideration. But yeah, there's many different reasons.
We're doing rapid fire review today. And you brought us 5 of your most recent notable reads, which are obviously all memoirs.
Well, they're memoirs and biographies.
And biographies.
Memoirs are basically penned by the author, by the subject themselves or ghostwritten. But there's also biographies that are pieces that are that are written by other people, for other reasons.
And why are they all memoirs and biographies, Andy? Is this all you read?
Well, no, it's not all I read, but it is something. I'm personally writing a memoir myself, and it is something that I'm doing a lot of research on and wanting to hear different ways of writing, different perspectives, and different approaches. And I'm interested in these particular characters. In this particular case, they're all male, and they all have lived a few years, or for the most part have. And it also, it goes back, it's a bit of a habit because when I was in the music business as a writer and presenter in that world, biographies and those kinds of things were essential. Like you had to know, you had to do your research and find out who is this person, where did they come from, what's their story, what are these songs about. And so this is a bit of a trained thing for me I've trained myself to look for this kind of material, and I enjoy this kind of material. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason why I'm into this particular phase of my life.
Well, you can't hope to be a good memoir writer unless you read a lot of memoirs yourself, right? Sure. It's like cooking. You can't be a good cook unless you eat, consciously. You can't be a good musician unless you listen to a lot of music. Otherwise, you're just gonna be stuck in your own bubble. You need to know what's out there, what the market is, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna resist a little bit and say, if you read too many memoirs, then you might start feeling like you need to cater your memoir to be a particular type of thing. Does it fit into this, or does it fit into that category, or am I expressing this way because I want people to take it this way? And I'm not sure if you can start losing the authenticity of writing a memoir if you read too many or feel like your memoir has to be a particular kind of
follow a
story.
formula.
Yeah. I don't know if that's something you examine.
That I'm conscious of? Yes, yeah. I am conscious of it. More than anything so far, I seem to be gleaning things I don't want to do as I read these things.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something I don't want to do, or I don't want to go on for 30 hours. No.
Well, that'll be a good angle to explore as we go through these.
This could have been a good blog post, like there's a lot of that. But everybody has a different style, and especially when it comes to humor. Humor is a very important thing, something I gravitate toward a lot in anything I do. Mm-hmm. And I think that humor in a memoir is sometimes lacking, frankly. Sometimes it's very, very earnest.
It's very chronological. This happened, and this happened,
right.
and this happened. If you take the time to just tell good stories, that's just going to stick with people.
Yeah, so I'm that's where I'm at so far, is like what not to do.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's get cracking. We have 5 books that we're going to go through. These are all memoirs and biographies as you've read recently. And we'll go through your rapid fire thoughts. In other words, we're going to put on a 15-second timer. You're going to give us your thoughts in that timer, and then we'll slowly unpack and unravel after that. Okay?
All right. I'm ready.
Okay, The first one is Nick Drake, The Life by Richard Morton Jack.
Only recorded 108 minutes of music over 3 short albums between 1969 and 72. Brilliant acoustic guitar player with honey as a voice, the male Joni Mitchell.
Oh, the male Joni Mitchell.
Is he Canadian?
That's a personal
British.
thought.
He was
He's
British.
a British guy.
He was British, yes.
So if he lived such a short career, what merits him having his own memoir held in high regard by Mr. Andy Frank?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Nick Drake died at his own hand at the age of 26, so he didn't even make the 27 club.
Wow.
He had severe mental health issues for a number of years. Came from a great family, very loving background, lots of loving friends, lots of support, but he just didn't make it. And so why was someone who recorded 108 minutes of music so revered? He wasn't famous at the time. Most people didn't know who he was in the era of Cat Stevens and Joni Mitchell and other singer-songwriters of the early 1970s, who were all the rage at that time. But as the years went by and people discovered his music, people fell in love with this guy's catalog, to the extent of fans going over to his parents' house and asking if they can sleep in his bedroom and doing all those kinds of things. And then the parents saying, yeah, sure, come on in.
Different time.
And so this particular biography is the most exhaustive one on the subject of this young man's very fascinating and sad life. It's maybe an example of making sure this is the most comprehensive work you'll ever read on someone's life. It's incredibly comprehensive, way too much for me as a matter of fact, but I ended up getting through it all because I was really interested in the story.
Way too much because of the tone as well? Was there something that
Just
played in the tone?
A repetition. They repeated it a lot because what the writer did, and the writer and narrator, what he did is he interviewed so many of his friends, peers, fellow musicians, parents, sisters, whatever. And they would say things about Nick that were basically repetitive. He was very quiet. And the next person would say, yeah, he was a really sullen kind of introverted guy. Yeah, and he was really quiet. And it went on and on.
Okay.
I'd be walking with my headphones and listening to his book saying, yeah, I know he's quiet. I get it. I get it,
But how quiet is he?
Yeah. But he wanted to, it was a work of journalism. He wanted to accurately reflect the things that were being said about Nick Drake, and he wanted it to be in the right context, and he wanted the right people quoted and so on.
I'm curious to check out his music.
Yeah, Jacob, as a musician, and Remy, you're a musician as well, you guys will both love it. It's magnificent acoustic guitar player, beautiful voice, lovely songs. Like I said, 108 minutes, 3 albums. It's on Spotify or whatever your favorite downloading material of choice.
So that biography was Nick Drake, The Life by Richard Morton Jack. The next one for RFR, Andy, is Green Light by Matthew McConaughey.
All right. What a voice. What a book. One of the better actors of our time. His sidebar pieces are as good as the main autobiographical text. 6 million copies sold so far. It's ridiculous.
Andy, why did this sell 6 million copies?
Well, he's a mega Hollywood star. I think he won an Academy Award for Dallas Buyers Club. Anyway, if he didn't, he should have, but I think he did. He's a phenomenally good-looking individual who, every time he appears on TV in a commercial, he does commercials and stuff from time to time, Helen just stops in her tracks, Helen, my wife, and looks over at the TV and she says, damn, that guy is just so good looking.
And that's why commercials still work.
And she just says that for very few. She might think that for everybody, for all I know, but she says that for very few people.
She's just open about it.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey is one of those guys. He has a really interesting Texas voice. He's authentically from that region, like the Dallas Buyers Club, that movie that he played, this drug dealer back in the day. That's his accent, and it's so charming. So when he tells his stories, they're extremely candid to almost a squirmy fault. I'm not going to go into some of those stories, but some of them are like, yeah, I didn't want to know that about you, dude. Interesting story. If you like celebrity bios, it's among the better ones you'll consume.
Did you listen to the audiobook?
That's
feels
all.
like-
Yeah. Everything
Okay.
I'm talking to
Okay.
you about is audiobook consumed. Yeah. None of this is read.
Doesn't it feel very honest? I feel like Matthew McConaughey, when he talks, I've heard him in interviews, watched no movies, I don't think, by him, but he sounds very honest for a guy who's so loved and for a guy who's really up there. That's the impression I get of him. And I'm hoping that that's what the memoir was like.
Yeah, it is a brutally honest and honest to like self-deprecating to himself. You know, like he's not trying to build himself up to being anything more than he is.
Yeah.
It's not personal propaganda.
No, I didn't find it personal propaganda, but maybe, I mean, who knows how it could be interpreted by others. But no, I think he's honest, and he really doesn't have a poop left to give, is the way he comes across. All right, like if you don't like me, I don't care. Like I'm just gonna keep making bazillions of dollars in everything I touch, and my life is pretty cool. So
Show up
whatever.
when he wants to.
You don't like this story? Too bad. You know, it's a nice place to be.
So sure, he's a rich celebrity, and he wrote a memoir, and he sold 6 billion copies of it.
Yeah.
But what is it about Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey that like what's its premise? Like, what is it about him that made his memoir interesting? Like, does he have an interesting upbringing, or does he have a thesis about it?
He has a thesis about everything. I mean, he has the whole thing about Green Lights is that it's a little sidebar that is like, here's the lesson I learned about this chapter of my life. And that is, that's what I mentioned about, you know, these sidebars being as interesting as the actual autobiographical content itself, is what he learned having gone through whatever exercise he did. And sometimes they're really short summations, other times they're quite detailed. And that's his observations are fun, because that's where he digresses from just doing and then this happened and then that happened and then this reaction, you know. He talks about his philosophy on life and take it or leave it kind of. Sometimes it's tongue in cheek, sometimes it's not something you'd want to hear, and other times it's very sweet, you know. Yeah.
So that was Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Sorry, my screenreader is reading this so wrong right now. What's his last name again?
McConaughey. He goes McConaughey, yeah.
McConaughey, okay. Yeah. Matthew McConaughey. All right, Rami, do you want to read the next one?
Okay, screenreader humbles us all, huh? Okay, so all right, the next one is, and this is third of 5, Open, an autobiography by Andre Agassi.
Great tennis player, married to Brooke Shields at one time. Very interesting story, candid as hell. But what I remember most is how he struggled to play with his hairpiece as his hair betrayed him way too soon.
Hairpiece? You're gonna have to elaborate on that. What do you mean hairpiece?
Is that a toupee?
So Andre Agassi was, when he came up, he was, like most tennis stars, he was a junior champion. He was kind of a toast to the town from his neighborhood in the U.S. as an American guy. And he was quite handsome. And so he was a bit of a pinup boy when he first became this celebrity tennis player. But then in his early 20s, his hair started to go on him. And I don't know how many times in the book I would read something about, I had to clip on my hairpiece before hitting the court, because he actually then put a hairpiece on his head while playing competitive tennis.
Like a toupee, like a wig.
Yeah. To make, and then ultimately, so for some reason that really stuck with me. Like, wow, that's vanity. But then ultimately, he shaved his head. He became kind of, I won't say one of the first, but it became trendy around that time. This is now, I'm talking, I think, late 90s or so. He shaved his head and grew a little goatee or something to completely change his image. And it worked for him. And then he also became a better tennis player. So it's, it's one of those.
He wasn't stressed about his hair anymore.
Yeah, he became more aerodynamic, yeah. So the book was good. It was a bit dry, and really a lot of and this happened, then that happened, then that happened, then that happened kind of read. And I did struggle by the end. I think this was one of the books I might have left a chapter or two unread.
Oh. Yeah. Why'd you pick it up?
Because I liked him as a player. I liked him as an athlete. I liked watching him play tennis. I thought he was somebody that I'd be interested in reading about. And for the most part, I was. Yeah.
All right.
And at the time, it was also as candid for a sports figure. It was quite candid compared to what most sports figures had put out by that time. This book goes back a few years. 2009 is when it was released.
Okay.
So that was Open, an autobiography by Andre Agassi. The next one is Miracle and Wonder, Conversations with Paul Simon by Malcolm Gladwell and Bruce Headlam.
Paul Simon, one of the top 5 greatest singer-songwriters of the 20th century, brilliantly interviewed by Malcolm Gladwell. The book had rights to Paul's selected music, a rare treat for music bios. Gladwell had Simon's trust, and the piece is magic.
Huh?
By the way, that's Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel, right? Am I thinking of the right person? Okay,
that is
perfect.
the same, one and the same, yeah.
So who's Bruce Headlam?
I don't know.
Jeez, some guy. Okay, tell me to. I know
Well,
who
no,
Malcolm Gladwell is.
I think Bruce might have been, and I might be wrong here, but I think Bruce might have been the technical director of this piece, because what happened was Paul, who's now in his 80s, he's the same generation as the Beatles and others like that, and hit his fame around the same time. He was interviewed in Hawaii, and he always had a guitar nearby to explain the songwriting process or something. So sound was really, really important, and like picking up, it was just absolutely brilliant sonic experience to listen to this conversation. And then for Paul to, in his early 80s, his voice still has a beautiful timbre to it. This lovely timbre, he's always had it. And so it was fun to listen to him recreate some of the music and then saying why he chose one chord over another, etc., that kind of thing. So it was beautifully done.
So was the story, like the musical part of it, obviously you seem to have thoroughly enjoyed, and the deep dive into that aspect of it. The storytelling, the getting to know you bit.
There was a film made about Paul Simon that was released at TIFF in Toronto a couple of summers ago. And it was the definitive biography of this very famous musician, and it was really good, like one of my favorite. But it was long and so on. But it was well done. But there was no warmth. The subject didn't seem to really want to be there. Like he was there, he did his part, but the warmth wasn't there. Whereas in this particular piece with Gladwell and the other guy, Jacob. He was so warm and so there was a respect there that he had, a mutual respect, and maybe it's because of Malcolm Gladwell and his portfolio of great writing over the years. Maybe there's some mutual fandom going on between Paul Simon and Malcolm Gladwell, but it came across so beautifully and warm, and that made it. And then, of course, Ramya, they covered a ton of territory. I mean, we're talking about 60 years of a career and all the various music things. And, it was
also, just to set the record straight on Bruce Headlam, who is a very important person out here. He's a journalist, editor, producer. He worked in media and storytelling. He was a media editor at New York Times, so...
Thank you. He was not just the guy holding a microphone. I appreciate that, Ramya. Thank you very much.
He co-hosted the Broken Record podcast. Like, come on, guys. He did the most. He deserved this role.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, he didn't.
But the lack of warmth part I find interesting because this often seems to happen in situations where they create like biopics of musicians and artists. How detrimental was it to this experience?
The lack of warmth?
Yeah, the lack of warmth.
No, I'm talking about the movie that was made about Paul Simon.
Oh, the movie, sorry.
Was a bit cold, I found.
Yeah.
It was brilliant film, and I would strongly recommend it for any Paul Simon fans to watch that film. But
this just felt more personal.
It felt like a conversation between friends. It really did. And that's what really
I love
made
that.
it. Yes, and that's what made it jump out at me. It was not just about the music and about Paul Simon's life story, but it was just a conversation, and I loved that. It was so warm.
We talked about Tuesdays with Maury earlier in the year, maybe last year, on this show and on Kelly and Ramya. And Tuesdays with Maury was a conversation as well. It's like written as a biography, but really what you're getting is not an essay, not a self-portrait, but a conversation between two friends where you get to know the Professor Maury as he's dying through his journey of ALS. And it's the same thing, Andy. Like that, the memoir sticks, or biography sticks with me for that same reason, where it felt like a deep conversation that you were taking part in or listening in on versus just like hearing someone's breakdown of their life.
Yeah.
That's nice. It's done well. Okay.
A conversation with a friend.
Yeah.
A deep conversation with a friend.
It gets to places that you can't if it's just you.
Yeah.
Because when you have a good conversation with a friend like that, is because you know that what you're saying is being listened to with care from the other person. It's not just going into a void. It's not small talk. It's the furthest thing from small talk, in fact, because you've built that relationship. Anyways, the book we just brought up was Miracle and Wonder, Conversations with Paul Simon by Malcolm Gladwell and Bruce Headway. Rami, you want to read the last one as we wrap up?
This is the final. This is The Storyteller Expanded, because there's more to the story, by David Grohl.
Dave Grohl, drummer for Nirvana, founder of the Foo Fighters, a pop culture phenomenon in himself. I wanted more dirt on Nirvana, less on Foos. He uses similes like a barista uses coffee beans constantly, and it was a grind to get through the whole book.
Wow.
What?
Would you say that Dave Grohl's a nutty guy too? A little steamy?
Yes, you would say that. He's an amazing character. The guy is so prolific and has tremendous energy. And he knows everybody. And
It
everybody
needs
loves
to be
him.
mentioned that he has had some controversy ever since this book released, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
so the child and so on. Yeah. Mhm.
Well, the child. What? How? Because this book came out before that whole controversy came out, right? That kind of changes the context of reading it, right?
Yeah, it does. But I hadn't paid attention to any of that stuff. I just hadn't paid attention to his story, frankly, very much. Everybody kept telling me how awesome the book was. I said, okay, I'll listen
Too many
to it.
similes, though.
And
Did you go
I
in with
wished,
too many expectations or like high
yes, well,
expectations?
yes.
Yeah.
And I wished, like the Paul Simon thing had music. I wish there was music, but this is one of the copyright stupidities is that, you can talk about Smells Like Teen Spirit, but you can't even hear the riff to it. Like, it's too bad. It's a music book.
It's so annoying in that kind of context when they're like, that riff in that song Smells Like Teen Spirit. Oh, it's so good. All you want to do is listen to it.
Right.
If you've never heard it before, you're like, no, I really want to hear this thing.
Yeah,
it's so
hard to-
unsatisfying when you don't get to hear it.
Was it the type of book you wanted to get through even though it was disappointing because there was still stuff to be gotten? Or at the end of this, did you feel like you were better off not having read it?
No, I wanted to get through it, and I wanted to know. He's an interesting guy, and like I said, he uses a lot of similes, but they're quite creative for the most part. But man, that you could just do a book just on the similes that he uses to describe things.
Like clearly, the writing wasn't great.
But it was good. I mean, it was fine. It was fine. I was impressed by how prolific he was, like how much he would pull out of his butt to get through this thing. It was amazing. But it was almost too much. It was like, oh, this is too much. I know I'm sounding a bit like a broken record. I do kind of want to cut to the chase with a lot of these bios and and memoirs. But sometimes it's like I didn't need to know all that about that. So
maybe this is the ones where you're like, what not to do in a memoir.
Well, that's again, and again, that's just me. So
you can pick and choose.
Yeah.
All right, so that was The Storyteller Expanded by Dave Grohl. Andy, that's all the time we have. We want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing these 5 autobiographies / memoirs / biographies with us. Good luck on writing your own. I didn't know you were doing that. Maybe we'll have you on the show.
Maybe.
Obviously.
I'm look much more forward to reading yours 35 years from now if I'm still alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jacob,
All right.
we all are.
Noted.
All right.
Cheers, Andy. Cheers, Ramya.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today's AMI audiobook review. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We also have a repeat on AMI audio every weekend. That's Saturdays and Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern, and it repeats every 6 hours. I'm Jacob Shamansky. I was with Ramya. Our guest was AMI audio manager Andy Frank. Have a good one.